And hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to another edition of the SCFP Warm Up, the series of talks that sets the stage for SCFP, the workshop on software engineering for functional programming. SCFP is part of the Brazilian Conference on Software, Practice and Theory, CIBSoft 2025 program, which will take place in Recife, Pernambuco, Northeast, Brazil Northeast, from September 22nd to September 26th. And our workshop will happen on the morning of Tuesday, September 23rd, with a great program focused on software engineering and functional programming. The SCFP warm-up aims not only to prepare us, but also to warm up the hearts and minds of our community, bringing deep conversations, emerging technologies, and inspiring people from the software engineering and functional programming ecosystem. Today, we are very happy to welcome Mackenzie Morgan, a senior backend engineer at Level with experience in Erlang, Python, and Elixir. Mackenzie holds a computer science degree from the George Washington University and a Diploma de Espanhol como Língua Extranjera DELE Level B2 Upper Intermediate from Instituto Cervantes, 2023. And before we start our conversation, I want to thank our sponsors who make this event possible. Dashbit, a reference in Elixir and Erlang, and Erlang Solutions with a strong presence in the Erlang ecosystem, and the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, which supports and connects global initiatives across the ecosystem. And we also thank CIBSoft for hosting the SCFP workshop within its program. It's an important step to strengthen the visibility of functional programming in Brazilian academia and industry. And of course, this live stream is being broadcast on the Fronteiras da Engenharia de Software, Frontiers of Software Engineering YouTube channel, and will also be made available in an edited version on the Elixir in Focus podcast feed. So whether you're watching now or will watch or listen later, thank you. And I tell people on the YouTube stream if you want to write a question in the chat, feel free. If we have time, I'm going to ask Mackenzie. Mackenzie, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. It's great having you here with us. Let me stop here sharing this screen. And my first question for you is, what first drew you to study computer science? Why did you choose computer science? I know that in the US it's different. Let me just explain. Maybe you don't know, maybe our listeners and viewers don't know, but here in the Brazil, we choose before entering the university. I know that in the US you can enter the university and then after a few years you choose a major. What drew you to study computer science?
So I actually started studying computer science in high school. I took programming languages then, and I was already, making websites and using a little bit of JavaScript and that sort of thing before that. Well, if you're my age, you remember GeoCities and making websites with that in the late 90s. And so I was doing HTML and CSS and all that, and started taking programming classes in high school. But I actually, when I entered university, my intention was Japanese and international affairs as a pair of focuses that I would be doing. Diplomacy in Asia was the plan. But the siren song of the computer lab just drew me back. And so I started taking algorithms classes just for fun while I continued to study things like economics and political science and anthropology and all of that. And eventually I hit the point where I had to decide, because algorithms class and Japanese class were at the same time, which one I was going to do. And I switched to computer science. And by that point, I was already an Ubuntu contributor and, using Linux and everything.
You are already an Ubuntu contributor during undergraduate studies.
Yes. I started using Ubuntu right before I started university. And so I remember somebody in my Japanese class noticing that my computer was a Linux machine and going, wait, you're not in the engineering school? What? I was like, oh, I just wanted to try something new. I mean, I've used Windows my whole life. I've used a Mac a few times. I figured, Linux would be something new to try. And he was like, we're having a barbecue next week in the engineering school. If you want to come over, just, if anybody gives you trouble, just tell them I invited you. But I ended up, switching to computer science after all. Yeah.
Oh, well, that flexibility is quite good. Yesterday, I was talking to a student. She is studying, I believe, electrical engineering, and she wanted to move to she wants to move to computer engineering, but for that, it's very difficult to do that here in Brazil, at least in my university. You have to do another national test and then be lucky to be one of the selected, or maybe you can try to do some courses and there is a vacancy, and it's not so easy as, now I want to do computer engineering. And you see, it's the same. Both are engineering. In your case, they were different faculties, right?
Right. And, in theory, in the US, the first 2 years of your degree are general education, and then the actually focused part is the last 2 years. But the engineering students don't have that real split. It does take 4 years to get through the whole curriculum for engineering, and you just are doing the general stuff on the side the whole time. And it's just lucky that because I was taking the computer science classes for fun as my electives, I didn't screw up my schedule too much, and I finished in 4.5 years.
Great. And so you started programming during high school, right?
Or even in middle school, if you're counting like things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
And which programming language were you studying in high school?
In high school, we did Visual Basic for the first year and then Java for the second year.
Okay. And regarding functional programming, did you discover it during your undergraduate course or only later?
It was mentioned in one of the undergraduate courses. Like we had I don't remember what the name of the class was, but there was a class where we learned about different programming paradigms and things. But in that class, I didn't actually end up doing any functional programming. I did, as my big project in that class, rewriting between C++ and Python, I think it was a Qt app, because the Qt toolkit is available in both. But I do remember that when I was in university, I was dating a guy who was like super obsessed with Haskell. I still have the Haskell programming book he gave me. I have never learned it because he said he started immediately talking about the lambda calculus, and I went, "Oh, calculus, that's math. I don't." So he scared me off from functional programming with the word calculus. But eventually when I got to Elixir, the Elixir community does not talk about the theory all that much, and that made it a lot easier for me to slip in.
Yes, last year in the course, because let me explain for people that are watching on TV, on YouTube. It's also this is also part of my introduction to functional programming class. And last year we had a talk about Haskell by Zoe Peçanha. Zoe is also one of the hosts of the Elixir Foco podcast, but she couldn't be here today, and she loves Haskell. Actually, she learned Haskell before she learned Elixir. Now she works with Elixir. She's working at Dashbit. But so when did you?
Monad as my window manager at one point in college, which of course the configuration is all in Haskell, but that was the extent of what I could do was just configure my window manager until until learning Elixir. Then
it's Xmonad, right? The
Yep.
name. Yes, I remember. I tried this once, but I didn't like it very much. And so you started your career working a lot with Python, right? How did that experience influence the way you approach programming today?
Ooh. I mean, I would say I think I've used Python in almost every job I've had. There was like 1 year that I was in a Ruby shop. How's it influenced? So, of course, my introduction to things like using lambdas was Python, right? And just the idea of moving away from index-based for loops, like that I had learned with Java and Java, C, all those that I had to use in school. Moving to Python and being able to say for thing in list, that was I guess that sort of primed me a little bit for the getting into functional programming. But I know one thing I really appreciated when I started doing Elixir was that there was no longer any ambiguity about things like trying to remember, is it .sort or .sorted? Like in Python, if you use sort, I think if you use sort on a list, then it changes it in memory. And if you use sorted, then it returns the sorted list. And how many times have I had bugs where it's returning none because it changed it in memory, and now I'm trying to. So, I know Python is very proud of saying there's one way to do something instead of the Perl, there's more than one way to do it motto. But I feel like Elixir got that even further, and I really appreciate that.
And at what point in your career did you make the transition from mainly working with Python to using functional programming languages like Erlang and Elixir?
So in 2019, I started working at a newspaper called Axios, and I was there through just about the end of 2021. And Axios had Django, which is a Python web framework, running their website and CMS and all of that. And I, partway through my time there, got put onto the mobile team to work on the back end for the mobile app. And it was already mostly written by the time I got moved onto that team, and it was done in JavaScript. And I've also obviously used plenty of JavaScript in my career as well. I've used React a bunch. And so this was React mobile or React Native on the phone, and then NPM and Apollo for GraphQL on the back end. And it could not handle the load. Like 6 a.m., we send out the push notification saying, here are the headlines for the day, and then it crashed from all of the load. And the head of backend engineering there was familiar with Elixir from his past work, and he was like, okay, what we need is Phoenix. And so he called up a few folks he knew and contracted them to do a really quick rewrite from Apollo to Phoenix, and turned to me and said, go learn Elixir. And so I used the Elixir webpage guide and exorcism, and I had a few weeks to pick it up, but I felt like this just really clicked. Like all of the things that in object-oriented programming had always been kind of a little fuzzy and weird to me are gone when I'm doing functional programming. And so it was just like, this worked really well with my brain. So for the rest of my time at Axios, I was working simultaneously in Django and Phoenix and integrating them together. Like they were sharing a database, which that was interesting, doing all the migrations on the Django side and then having to catch Elixir up about what the database looks like now.
Yes, I know. Axios is a website, a news website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this reminds me of that. There was a very famous, I believe they don't use Elixir anymore, but it was a very famous case study for Elixir. It
Bleacher
was a,
Report,
huh?
Bleacher Report, the sports site.
Exactly. I believe they stopped using Elixir, right?
I think so. They got there's an interesting Reddit post out there. They got acquired. The new owners were like, no, we're not having that section be using that one weird language. Everybody has to standardize on the same thing and integrate all of the stuff. And from what was written on Reddit, after a very long time, they were still limping along with both systems because they couldn't figure out how to make this work. Like I recall the post saying stuff about like, if both organizations had something called user service, then the higher ups were like, well, then that should be one thing. And it's like, well, just because they both have the same name doesn't mean they do the same thing.
Yes, so I don't know about other programming language communities, but I know that this happens sometimes with Elixir companies here in Brazil. I know it has happened. A new CTO decides to change the technology, and then Elixir goes.
And the point at which I left Axios was when they switched to Go. And that was, yes, the old management left, the new management came in, they said, how are we going to hire anybody who does Elixir? There aren't enough people. And Tavon and I were like, well, we didn't know it when we started using it. People can learn. But
yes. After Axios, where did you go?
Next Role, which is an ad tech company. And there I got to work with Brujo and Miriam Pena and Pablo Costas, who are all fabulous people, and all members of the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation Education, Adoption, and Training Working Group, which I think you are also on. They would all simultaneously pop out of work to go join the meetings. But there I was working with Erlang, and I got the referral there from Miriam, who I had met at a CodeBeam conference.
Oh, nice. Yes, I have met Miriam at CodeBeam America 2022.
Yeah,
which
where we met.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no,
CodeBeam A Coruña.
In A Coruña.
Yes, at CodeBeam A Coruña, I've met Pablo and Brujo. And at CodeBeam America, I have met Miriam. Miriam is still, she has a high, I don't know how to say, but she's an important person in the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, and many things related to money go through her hands, because I know that because SE4FP is sponsored by the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, and I talked to Miriam about that. And about that, it's also important because the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, I tell all students to join the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. I'm not sure they did. It's free if you don't pay as a professional, and they send a calendar of events, and where it's the SE4SP is in the September calendar, and I believe, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation is involved. But were you at ElixirConf?
I was at ElixirConf in Krakow.
Oh, yes.
In May, because I spoke there, but I did not go to the ElixirConf in Florida.
Oh, Vanessa is asking for the link to the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. I believe it's erlef.org. Yes. I'm going to put in the YouTube chat in the, let me put here in the, there is a join us link. There is where you find how to join. Then you receive a link to the Slack. I have an undergraduate student that wants to do something related to machine learning and Elixir, And I told him, no, go to the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation Machine Learning Slack channel, and people will help you there. And he told me that people were very receptive to his questions. And I had a student also when I went to Codebin America 2022. It was also an undergraduate student, which was helped by José Valim and what's the name? Chan Moriarty, which is the guy that wrote the genetic algorithms in Elixir book and started NX with Valim.
I don't think I know him.
Yes, he's famous in the Elixir machine learning community because of the NX and also Paulo Valente, who is going to be a keynote speaker at our event in Recife, is also a member of that community. Let me see my next question. Yes, so let me stop there about next. First, I believe Nextrow, you told us that you were there with Brujo. I believe Brujo left Nextrow, and I believe Pablo left Nextrow too. Only Miriam is there, right?
No, Miriam left too. All three of them left, and was it Miriam left? Let's see. I think Brujo left in the middle of 2023. Miriam left in early 2024. Pablo left in September 2024. And then that's when I started job hunting.
But my question is that you, before that at...
That was Erlang rather than Elixir there.
Exactly. So at Axios, you knew Python, then you learned Elixir, and then at Nextrow, you already knew Elixir, but you had to learn Erlang. Right.
And they modified the code test for me at Nextrow because they did not want somebody who had no familiarity with OTP. And I was like, I don't have confidence that I can show you my understanding in Erlang syntax because I'm not really familiar with Erlang syntax. Can I do the test in Elixir? And so they converted the test to an Elixir test, which would still show that you understand how gen servers work and all of that, so that I could and data structures and whatever. So I could do the test in Elixir.
Yes, but what about your adaptation? Because in Erlang you have to put a dot or what semicolon?
Yeah, there's the semicolons, commas, and periods. Yeah, I remember looking at that and being like, man, somebody had a lot of confidence in people's understanding of how punctuation works in regular text. Because yes, in regular text, you separate clauses with commas and independent clauses can be separated with semicolons, and then you finish off your sentence with period. But but yeah, I mean, I think actually the capitalization was maybe something I found weirder. The thing where the capitalization determines whether it's an atom or a variable.
Yes.
Not having the pipe. I really missed the Elixir pipe.
Yes. And our previous SE4FP warm-up talk was about F#. Mm-hmm. And the guy showed the pipe in F#, which is basically the same as, it's almost the same as the one in Elixir. The difference is that it replaces the last argument, not the first argument.
Mm-hmm. But the difficulty in Erlang is that the collection might be the last argument, or it might be the second to last argument, depending on if you have a keyword list of options. And that makes it difficult to, that would be the difficulty in trying to implement a pipe for Erlang. I'm sure it would be doable, but it would be annoying to implement.
Let me read some messages here. Ivan Alvarez, a great guy from Mexico, he's told us that you went to Codebin Light Mexico and gave a talk. Mm-hmm. And he asked if Miriam Penn is the author of the Programming Live Build book from Prague Prog, and I told him no, it's Sophie de Benedetto. It's normal. If sometimes I kind of, they both are American. Physically they're not that different. So, and Ezekiel
Spanish, really.
Huh?
Miriam is Spanish, really.
Oh yes, but she lives in the US. and Sophie has an Italian last name, so it's all from Europe. But Ezekiel, I believe Ezekiel lives in Argentina. I'm not sure, but he wrote, "Is all we care, punctuation and shape of brackets." I believe he's talking about Erlang.
Yeah, because we were saying about how the punctuation trips people up in learning Erlang.
And Ricardo da Rocha wrote that he wants to read the genetic algorithms in Elixir. And yes, Ezekiel used to live in Argentina. But are you from Argentina? Which country are you, Ezekiel?
Hi. Sorry for not turning on the camera right now. I will try to do it a few minutes later. I'm now in Portugal, but yes, I was born and raised in Argentina.
Okay. Yes.
And I remember something about one of the things I like about Elixir are the macro system, which is much more sophisticated than the one in Erlang. And once Robert Bearding was doing a talk, and I made a snarky remark in the chat like just now, and I said that Erlang macros suck. And Robert Bearding say something very humbling. He said, "I did the macro system in Erlang." And yes, they suck.
Okay.
Yes,
okay, it suck.
he said, yes, they suck, but they suck for a reason. And then he proceeded to explain why they are like they are, because they wanted to have certain properties, simplicity, and so on. But
Yeah, in fact, the Elixir language is 50 reserved words, and with all that, well, this conjunction of words using metaprogramming, the whole language is programming. So it's very powerful. The metaprogramming as well, I forgot the name of my colleague, but yeah, that's awesome, man. You can do whatever you want if you know. You can extend the language. You can do many things when you understand what is behind the scenes of. There is no magic. That's the very cool thing about Elixir.
Great. We'll have a conversation about Erlang with Brujo in a few weeks. So let's move to the next question. There is it's not a question, just a comment by Cristiano Rocha on YouTube. He told us that he started to learn Erlang this week, which it's good. It's a nice language too. And of course, it's much older than Elixir, so some things are we cannot blame the creators.
Unicode.
Huh?
It's from the days before Unicode. So if, I remember Python 2 handling strings and this transition from Python 2 to Python 3 where Unicode became the default. Elixir, you got Unicode default, but Erlang, you got arrays of ASCII characters as the default, and you got to be explicit if you're trying to get real Unicode binaries.
So another very interesting.
There's actually a blog post from Brujo that I just refer to every time I have to deal with strings in Erlang. Yes,
I believe his blog is Erlang Battleground, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yes, there are many posts by invited bloggers. Just say Slava, which is from Ukraine. I had with Slava and Brujo a podcast, Hello Erlang, but because of the war, we stopped it. We even tried to go back with you, but something didn't work, and then we stopped. If Slava is here, maybe if you want to go back, if it's possible. I was expecting that this war had already ended by now, but yes, it's complicated. Let me ask a question about your contributions to open source projects.
Okay.
And you wrote in your CV that you have contributed to Ubuntu, to the Elixir standard library. What motivated you to get involved in open source? It was because of those middle school, high school years, and what have you learned from that?
So I would say, like, when I started doing open source stuff with Ubuntu, like the first thing I did was just testing out alpha versions of Ubuntu, and I wanted the shiny new things that weren't released yet, right? And I knew that there's a chance it would break my system, and so I learned how to use the machine without an X server, just in case the X server broke, because back in those days, that happened a lot. And like, I remember one of the first things that I chased down was that the SD card reader for reading, like, the card from my camera wasn't working on my laptop. And then, like, there was one version of, like, Ubuntu 7.04 Alpha 2 or something where it worked, and then it stopped working again before they released it. I was like, wait, okay, fine, what changed? Okay, somebody had upgraded the driver from version 14 to 16, and then somebody else came along and was like, I'm upgrading it to version 15, which was actually a downgrade, and, like, go hunt down who do I talk to get this put back, right? Just, like, figure out, chasing down the problem, even though I couldn't fix it myself, but I could at least let somebody know, here's the actual result of the debugging, right? And then I remember, like, then I fixed a thing in the graphical tool for GPG keys, because I would rather use the pointy clicky thing than do it on the command line. Like, that's not actually a very fun GPG is not really a fun program to use on the command line. But, like, it didn't work. So just fixing things that didn't work was, the motivation there. And I ended up getting really involved in Ubuntu over the years. Ended up, like, on the developer membership board, which, like, decided who got access to commit and stuff like that. And then when it came to, like, Elixir, the one thing I added, one little thing I added to the standard library was back in 2021, I was doing Advent of Code, the coding puzzles that happen in December. And there was a problem where I was like, gee, this sure would be easier if this certain function existed on map and on map is where I cared about it. And so I sent in an email to the, I used pattern matching in my code to catch the situations where I didn't need the things to change. And what this is, I should just specify. I think it's called replace lazy. And so it's like, if the thing exists in the map, use this function to update its value. And if it doesn't exist, then ignore it, right? And there was already a thing to where you could update a map using a function, but if the thing didn't exist, if the key didn't exist, it would generate it. So I was like, I want it without that. Or, you could do just replace, but then you had to separately run the function each time to, and I remember I sent an email to the Elixir email list suggesting this function and explaining what I had run into in Advent of Code that made me want this. And Jose, gave the go ahead on sending in a patch and went through that, got it accepted. And the next day, because he was live streaming each day, the previous day's Advent of Code problem, as he was live streaming, he's going through and then he stops and he goes, Mako, I see why you wanted that function.
Oh, that's great. I remember, I believe it was in 2018, his live Advent of Code live streams. Because I believe he did it once, and then many years later using Livebook.
Yep, he was using Livebook in 2021 when he did it.
There's a question here by Diego Reis. He asks, is it feasible to be a junior Erlang Elixir programmer, or due to the restricted market, it's easier to enter as a senior in other language?
That's a good question. I mean, I think right now it is difficult to be a junior engineer, period. A lot of companies are well, I'd say over the last 10 years, a lot of companies have been pulling back from hiring juniors and wanting to pretend like senior engineers sprout fully grown from trees. But I think, yeah, it is especially difficult with niche programming languages like Elixir and Erlang to be a junior, especially because a lot of the hiring of junior engineers happens in larger tech companies. They have a little more buffer to have a lot of junior engineers with some senior engineers overseeing them. Whereas when you're looking at startups, they tend to be like, they're hurrying, they're trying to get as much as they can done as quickly as possible before the funding runs out, right? It's like, okay, we have 3 months of money left and we need to get as much done as we can so that we can get the next 3 months of money, or 6 months, whatever it is. And that makes them somewhat allergic to hiring junior developers. But also, you don't tend to see niche languages like Elixir pop up all that much in the really big companies like Google, Microsoft, whatever. And so, you kind of get this rock and hard place thing there where the startups are who tend to be hiring for Elixir, but they don't tend to be hiring for juniors. The one big company I know that does, I can think of 2 big companies that use Elixir, and those are Apple and Adobe.
Yes, exactly. That was for the 2 cases. I believe there, Andrea Leopardi used it to work. I believe he stayed there for maybe 1 year. Andrea Leopardi, he gives talks at several conferences. I believe he's part of the Elixir core team. And there was a Brazilian guy. He was working for Apple in Germany, but I don't remember his name right now. And I don't know if he's still at Apple because people change jobs a lot. I'm probably going to return to this, but is Level Wall where you work right now a startup?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we have 8 engineers, something like that.
Yes. So, but as you mentioned that point that it's difficult for a junior engineer to be hired nowadays, and you are wearing a t-shirt that's stop forcing us AI into everything. Everyone hates it. Nobody asked for it. And do you think it's related to that, to AI everywhere, or because there is a guy, I don't know if
set it up a bit, but I feel like it was already like you weren't seeing job postings for junior engineers on company websites. Like I haven't seen job postings for junior engineers in years and years and years. And I like at Nextroll, I asked about the fact that we didn't ever have postings for junior engineers on the website. And the answer was that all of the junior hiring that Nextroll did was either through like career fairs at universities or at like the Grace Hopper Convention for Women in Computing, Celebration of Women in Computing, or there were some boot camps, coding boot camps that they had a relationship with. And so the junior postings, that didn't actually tend to be public postings. It was, they had their funnels to find junior engineers through those schools and through that conference, but not really like just posted publicly for anybody to send in their resume, which I think makes a big, and like, I don't think they're alone in that. And I think that's a big disadvantage to anybody who is doing the self-taught route, because they don't have those institutional connections to job postings.
Yes, because some people think, oh, no, it's because of AI. And there are some people, no, it's happening because of X and Y and Z. And
I mean, I think it was already happening, but it's just been sped up by AI.
Okay, so I've had the chance to see you at CodeBeam Coruña in Spain and CodeBeam San Francisco 2022, CodeBeam America. Actually, I believe the name was CodeBeam America, that edition. And I know you often give talks at conference. You have already mentioned that you went to Elixir Conf Europe 2025. Why do you do that? What do you enjoy most about speaking at events like this?
Sometimes I wonder that myself. Generally while I'm feeling like really nervous, like, oh gosh, I'm about to go on stage, then I'm like, why did I sign up for this? But oh, I don't know. I mean, there's a chance to share things that I find interesting with other people. I know actually the very first time that I spoke at a conference, that was an interesting one because I had not that initiative did not come from me. The first time I spoke at a conference was the Ohio Linux Fest in 2008, I think, and I had gone to. I knew some of the organizers because they were part of the Linux user group in my hometown, and like I visited for summer vacation. I met them, and then they sent somebody, like they knew a conference that I was going to be attending, and they knew somebody else who was going to be there, and they told him to inform me that I would be submitting to their call for papers. And I was like, what? So then we had to figure out what could I talk about, and that was when I started talking about security stuff at Linux Fest back then.
Okay, and yes, because I have given talks at some conference, but right now I really want to organize events. I have organized one in Fortaleza, which is northeast of Brazil. Then I was part of the organization of Elixir Days in São Paulo, which is the largest city in Brazil. I have organized one here in Curitiba. I'm trying to organize another one here in Curitiba. So students, if you want to give a talk, please get in touch. As long as it's related to Elixir, Erlang, Glean, anything like that, you can submit a talk. Do you know anything about Glean? Did you ever try Glean?
I haven't played with it at all. I know that Raul really loves it,
Yes.
and I assume that he's going to be talking to you about it.
Yes.
But I have not played with it myself. I do think it's neat that they say like it compiles to be used in the browser too.
Yes, there's a JavaScript version. I can say I don't know if it transpiles to JavaScript or if it's what's the name of the virtual machine of the browser? There is I don't remember, but there's a way to run in the browser and the
WebAssembly people are saying in the chat.
Yes, I believe.
And Lucas is saying V8 Spider Monkey. V8 or Spider Monkey as the name of the.
Okay. Was
people are saying in the chat.
Oh my! I wasn't seeing the new messages. Okay.
Diego says that it is transpiling. Yes.
Yes, Glean transpiled to JS. Okay. And let me read a few more messages here before I believe we have two more questions in my script. At Bogota, a Bancolombia is using Elixir. That's great. Bancolombia is probably a bank, right? You know Spanish. It's easy for you, but maybe for someone.
Banco would be bank, and so
Yes, lots of banks use Elixir or some functional programming language. Here we have a very large digital bank in Brazil called Nubank, and it uses Clojure. And it was this company that bought Plataforma Tech, which was the company by José Valim, but they didn't bought it because of Elixir. They bought it because of the people that worked in Clojure with them. Ricardo da Rocha Victor asks, I have a career in OOP. How do you suggest a transition to Elixir?
Well, I got lucky in having a job where I got to do both Python and Elixir, right? But you know, I think if you wanted to switch to, like, if you're currently doing stuff with like Flask or Rails or Django, then I would imagine that getting going with Phoenix, just even as a personal project, or if there's an open source site that's built with it that you could contribute to, that demonstrating that you actually know your way around it would be how to convince somebody that they should in fact hire you to do Phoenix things. I would say also, like, I know at Level All we have a few people who did not know Elixir when they started. They were front end people. They were React developers who we needed some front enders, and they have been picking up live view, picking up Elixir and live view stuff, but they came from that direction where there was, okay, well, you have front end expertise, so now apply that expertise to this Elixir built app. So Ricardo, I don't know if you are more back end or front end right now, and if you do things like React or Vue or whatever, but that could be a way in if you're able to get that overlap.
And so my next question is about Level All. What's Level All? What does it do? And which technologies you use besides Elixir?
So Level All is a startup that makes educational content. The main focus is high school students and their guidance counselors. So there's some states in the US, because our education system is very split up, managed locally, not federally, where in order to graduate, you have to have a plan for what you're going to do after graduation, whether that is that you're going to apprentice as a plumber under your dad, who's a master plumber, or you're going to go to university and study electrical engineering, or whatever it is that you plan to do. You have to know what it is before you graduate. Or if you are going to university, then the process of how do you apply, how do you get scholarships, how does all this work? If your parents didn't go to university and you're going to be the first one, that is often a barrier for a lot of people, just not having the ability to get advice on how all this works from their family. And so Level All seeks to level the playing field among students by giving them that information. So we have stuff to teach them about how college applications work, make sure that they're on the right timing so they don't miss the deadlines, teach them about budgeting, financial planning, how to pay for college. I've just last week released a new feature related to finding scholarships for university. And we have been a strictly live view shop up to now. There are not even, like, most companies have some Python scripts sitting around to just run some background tasks. Don't even have that. It's entirely Elixir. However, we are in the process of shifting to being more API based because we're adding an iOS app. Yeah, I can say that. I can say that because we publicly had a job posting for an iOS lead developer, so I can say that. But so we're shifting to a more traditional backend API, front end separate application model, and so we are adding a JavaScript framework into the mix, along with obviously the iOS stuff. And we are using things I have had to learn since starting include Ash and Oban. We actually have a training with Alembic this week on Ash.
Which is the name of the creator of Ash?
Zach Daniel?
Yes, exactly. He's on Blue Sky. You're on Mastodon, right?
Yes.
But not on Blue Sky.
Correct.
Yes, I'm also somehow people interact more with me on Blue Sky than on Mastodon. So sometimes I only post on Blue Sky because I'm lazy. But I have a question here by Lucas. Functional abstractions are taught early in Bing languages, partly due to their telecommunication origins. Do you think this makes it easier for newcomers to learn how to build scalable and reliable systems compared to Python, where it does not seem to be the main concern of the ecosystem?
I would say yes. The functional abstractions, like teaching about things like lambda calculus, which, like I said, turned me off from learning Haskell. That part I never hear Beam people talk about. But the early focus on concurrency, I think, is really helpful to building systems like that. Whereas in Python, that tends to be treated as an advanced topic, and you have to go. You could be writing Python for years and years, and then when you want to do something asynchronously, you're like, oh shoot, I need to look up how that works. Whereas it's they're very easy. Like, okay, we're gonna stream. We're gonna do async stream, whatever, right from the beginning in Elixir. You are muted.
Yes. Are you following the news about the type system? Elixir
Not very closely. I know it has been piece by piece coming through over the last few releases, and I did go to the presentation on it at the ElixirConf in Krakow, but I will not claim to have understood it. There was a lot of math up on those slides, more advanced math than I can. Well, I don't know. Some of it was sets and stuff. I definitely learned about those, but to be fair, that was like 20 years ago, and I don't remember all the syntax.
Yes, my question was basically if you were eager to use a typed Elixir or no, or it's okay for me right now.
I do think so I know like at Nextral we were pretty adamant about always making sure we include our specs and that Dialyzer was happy and all of that. And we have Dialixir in the CI system at level all. I do think having marked types is helpful, not just for the code, but also for the human, because then you can, like, it's handy to me to be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, this thing's going to give me back an okay tuple, or oh, this one wants an ID versus a full struct. But I don't. It seems like the new typing system is maybe not going to require actually typing in the hints anymore, because, like they said, it's gradual automatic typing. And I'm like, I kind of like seeing the type hints for myself so that I know what I'm supposed to do with this function. So I don't know about that.
Okay. And now our last two questions. There is a one by Vanessa Câmara. How was it for you to start working in an area that was mainly recommended to men than it is to women? Did you or other girls struggle with gender stereotype?
So in my high school programming classes, I was the only girl. And in university, at first there were, in the intro classes, there were maybe 1/5 of the class were women. But those classes were shared between computer science and computer engineering and systems engineering and several different majors. So by the time I graduated, I was one of 2 women in the graduating class for computer science. Most of the boys that were in the computer science classes when I was in university were, they were fine. They treated me perfectly normally. I remember one of them said that sometimes he would just nod along and then check Wikipedia for what the hell I was talking about later, because I would come back talking about things I had heard at conferences. And which, obviously were not part of our curriculum. They were just extra things. There was one boy who had a tendency to say things about how girls did not belong in computer science. He would just use anything as an excuse for, this is why we shouldn't be here. And he actually said that in class one. Oh, no, it was in class one day. Somebody was having problems with, one of the boys was having problems with a presentation he was doing, a tool he was using. Turned out to be user error, but when he couldn't find the button for something, this kid said, well, that's shitty. A woman must have written it. And the handful of us sitting near him heard that, and some of the boys nearby gave him a shove, but the professor ignored it. And we ended up talking to some of the female professors in the faculty, and one of them was his advisor. Well, actually, I didn't talk to her. She heard it from the one I talked to. Like, it apparently got spread around between them. And she pulled me out of the hallway. She's like, did he really say that? He's my student. Oh. And so that ended up resulting in this was in our capstone. This was in our course for like our thesis class. Because we don't do written theses, we did project-based thesis. And that ended up resulting in there being a day where the professor was like, okay, and today we're going to talk about professionalism and the workplace and, things like sexual harassment. So yeah, I've also experienced some bad behavior at conferences in the past. If you look at my speaking history, there's a 10-year gap in my conference speaking, and that's after the time that I was assaulted at a conference, which was back when having codes of conduct in conferences was still very new. Codes of conduct in conferences and in software projects were things that at that time were brand new, and we were like, I was part of the geek feminism group, like geekfeminism.org. We were pushing for the introduction of codes of conduct.
Great.
And that conference had a code of conduct, but they hadn't worked out how they were going to actually implement it. And it turned out that one person had assaulted 2 of us. And because all the organizers just talked about it as the thing, they didn't realize that there were actually 2 things that had happened. Yeah. And gave him a second chance without realizing that he'd already used 2.
Oh, that's sad. But let's move to another topic, which is let me just contextualize here. I live in Curitiba. If I drive 9 hours west, I get to Paraguay, where they speak Spanish. But I barely can say a few words in Spanish. But you earned a Diploma de Español como Lengua Extranjera DELE B2 in Spanish, and you are now learning Italian. Mm-hmm. What motivates you to keep studying new languages?
I've always found languages fascinating, and I actually think of programming in terms of linguistics more than I do in terms of math. I started learning Spanish when I was 6, and then in high school, I didn't take the placement test to get out of intro Spanish, so I was really bored. So I took Japanese because it would be harder. I tried to do Russian and Japanese simultaneously in university. That was a bad idea. Don't do that. I see Ivan shaking his head. But I restarted learning Spanish back in 2017, 2018. I had clients from Argentina. Infobae, the Argentine newspaper, was a client that I had at the Washington Post. And when they realized that I could speak some Spanish, they're like, why are we speaking English? And I was like, because I cannot speak that much Spanish. So I started studying. And then eventually when I was working at Nextrol, I was working with all Spanish speakers, right? With Brujo and Miriam and everybody. And so I got a lot of chance to practice there, and that really helped. And now I'm learning Italian because I have cousins in Sicily who I have never been able to speak with.
Oh, that's great. Ezekiel wrote that in Paraguay they also speak Guarani, which is and I exaggerated a little bit.
People in Paraguay, isn't it like 60% of people in Paraguay speak Guarani?
I'm not sure. I have a colleague who is from Paraguay, but of course we speak only in Portuguese. He lives in Brazil. I also have a colleague from Argentina, but if I want, I have who to practice with, but I don't. It's a question by Ezekiel. Why isn't linguistics and semiotics not part of the regular curricula in CS? It seems important. It's not exactly a question, right? It's just, but
I can answer.
Yeah, I can answer as a professor at the university that there are so many things that people want to add to our courses that if you would add everything, it would be 10 years. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. Sometimes we fail. Our computer engineering takes 5 years, and it's very difficult for a student to take 5 years. Sometimes they take 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's problematic for us. And there's another problem. For us to have a linguistics and semiotics course during our computer science or computer engineering course, we'd have to have professors from other departments to teach for our course. I know it's very different in the US because usually you have very large classrooms, and so you can send your students to another department, but that's not the case for us here. So we cannot say, I have 40 computer engineering students here who want to study linguistics with your students. There's no room for everyone, so we have to choose. So I believe you answered my last question, which was, has learning for foreign languages influenced the way you think as a software engineer? I believe that's it. So
yes, as far as I'm concerned, I'm learning how to speak to the computer.
Yes, and I know he's not usually a nice guy, but there's a guy from the Ruby community, is David Heinemeier Hanson. He sometimes says some very wise things, and sometimes he says some very stupid things. But one of the wise things he once told was that programming is like writing. I believe he wrote a blog post. Exactly, Ivan wrote. DHH is how he's known. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. For those of you who want to dive deeper into Elixir Erlang, stay tuned for SE4FP, which will happen on September 23rd. I would say maybe follow the main Elixir Erlang Bing conference. Maybe there will be a talk by Mackenzie in the future. I know that I'll probably not going to any conference in the US in the next few years because...
Understandable.
Me too, my friend.
Yes, I'm afraid that they will see my social networks and, oh, no, you can't enter here. And so SE4FP, it will be in Brazil. It's safe for Mexicans, Ivan, but it's too soon for you. It's going to be in September. I want to thank our sponsors again, Dashbit, Erlang Solutions, the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. I believe Ivan mentioned Lorena Mireles. I believe she works at Erlang Solutions. I'm not sure because I know that Erlang Solutions also had to fire some people, and
they just did a giant layoff. Yeah.
Yes, so I'm not sure if
for most of their Latin American employees.
Yes, I'm not sure if Lorena is still there, but I believe she is. And the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, where we are part of the education working group. And as I have already mentioned, that this live stream is also available on the Elixir in Foco podcast. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.